börja.
Yes, we can. And I also want to introduce my colleague Anders Nord, that had worked together with us for many years now, and he's going to be in the workshop in the afternoon. Well, nice to be here. And Martin and I think this is
You're coming and going. It's your
my
hair,
hair.
love.
Oh, how can we handle that?
I don't have that problem.
You know how to do it?
No, I don't have that problem.
Okay. And we come from the greatest democracy in the world, because that's what we work with, democracy. Is that true? Don't we need to do anything? And that's what we're going to talk to today, what we need to do, because it's important for the democracy that we handle complex issues. And at Salar, we have a special mission from 2003 to work with citizen participation and citizen involvement in different issues that the municipality and the regions have to deal with. And we have a new mission from 2015. Every 4 years, our Congress, now it's not my hair, but it's still, I hear my voice disappeared. We have Congress with our politician, because we are steered by the politician from the local authority in Sweden. And we have every 4th year we have a Congress where they take the decision about what Salar are going to work with and how we can support our local authorities. And in 2015 we got a new one. We have had the mission to work with citizen participation and co-creation since 2000, as I said. But what we have more, and what we got from 2015, was that we also need to work with it out from the point of sustainability, democracy, and social sustainability. And it's really different. And it's about what's happened in the society in Sweden during the last couple of years. And we try to give a picture about it and why we think it's so important to work with the complex issues. And that's what our politicians say to us. We can work with citizen participation in easy issues, in small questions and small problems. But how do we handle the really difficult, the really complex situation that we in our society? And how do we work at Salar? We invite the municipality. We can't say to them, you must work like this. We invite them and say, hi, do you want to work together with us? Do you want to develop new frames and new process together with us? So we work with networks, and we both have knowledge network that we try to give the politician and the civil servants new knowledge about how you can involve people to develop the society. But we also work with development networks, and there where you have been involved mostly, because we need some crazy people there to try new things and to really involve in the process and be a process leader, a facilitator in many ways. Do you want to say something?
Crazy people is the new normal.
Yeah.
Could you switch the slide?
To this one?
Because what Lena is saying from my perspective is so strong. I come from the outside in a sense as being a consultant, but also from sort of really wanting the desire to make change and make a difference and also make a living, of course. So the organization I'm with now is called Dialogues, which is a social enterprise really facilitating this sort of work. But what is absolutely impossible to do is now possible to do, because we are able to work from within the system. We work directly with politicians, we work directly with civil servants in the municipalities and regions. So Salar is quite a powerful source to work from, so we can gain access to real situations, to real issues, to real people. What is also so clear is that we believe that we have a pretty good well-working democracy. If we listen to Richard, he says, well, you're sort of at the edge of what we learned so far on democracy. But what we're also realizing that edge might be quite steep on the other side, because stuff's happening that we do not like at all, and it's sort of disrupting what we normally could take for granted. The funding is actually coming partly directly from the government, especially on the prototyping work we've been doing for the last 5 years, because we want to learn fast and fail cheaply. So we talk about, rather than we actually think what we know we're doing, we assume that we don't know what we're doing. So we say we are prototyping in order to learn, to try to find different paths to really address these complex issues. So by having support from government, both financially, it makes it easier to gain access to the real hot issues. We don't have to be pissed off activists on the side saying, hey, listen to us, we're in the system. And that is also a critical point, that we address these issues not from the inside out or the outside in, to say, okay, this is a whole system. These politicians and civil servants are a part of the problem, actually, because they have their ways of working. They have we're going to call it arrogance in a little while, but they're quite arrogant and controlling in how they perform their democracy work, which really needs to change fundamentally. And luckily, we're allowed to do that because we work from within the system. And there's something that we've come to realize, which at least is not so crazy, it's rather more painful, is the insight that we have to enable the no voices to come much stronger through in these processes. Unfortunately, these processes have a tendency to gather the people who think alike. And they assume that the other one's the enemy, and that's the vice versa on the other side, symbolically. So what we're lacking is not the strong voices, lacking is the ability to convene these strong voices, symbolically yes and no, in the same room at the same time, to go into that, as Tor put it, that metaphoric fire, because that fire has energy, which is both painful but also potentially really innovative. But what has happened is that we've done the NVA, National Values Assessment, for Sweden. Tor and I had a big deal in starting that up, and you're still in it. I've left it now. But NVA, 7 years in a row, has shown us a very complacent, quite egotistical view on ourselves, which is really challenging. And what has happened just during this summer is that the values, the Swedish values, is potentially, or it has already happened, being hijacked by the right-wing nationalistic attitude, xenophobic version of reality, to say, okay, if you're not properly Swedish, you don't belong here, or if you want to belong here, you have to become properly Swedish, which is directly not inclusive, it's vice versa. And that is a scary thing. So it's really happening, what we've been fearing for the last couple of years. We've been talking about it, and people said, yeah, you're just sort of a bit murky, guys. Look at all the good stuff that's in there. Yeah, it's in there too, but there's also some really hot zones we need to address. So that's what we're doing on a very day-to-day basis. It's hard work, but meaningful.
Well, this is some picture of Sweden. It looks very, very nice, and we have a very nice country to look at. But we also can see that the last couple of years we see much more of this. Burning cars, riots, and aggregation between groups. So we can see under the last couple of years that we have in the municipality that we can see increase of hate and crime against politicians. We can see corruption in the public services. And we can also see that we have some extremism, radicalization, and exclusion of people. So we can see that we think that we are the great democracy in the world, and we have all the law in place, but we have something in the society that we need to struggle with. And we need to see that the municipality could be a really good facilitator to make the meeting possible for different groups and different people. So we can see.
This is a tough one because we're following the path on the upper right-hand side. It's actually quite lonely. Yeah. You could be seen as the lonely nut. That's sort of my role to play. But there's something very critical in this illustration, even if it's humoristic, is that there actually is ways to work with it. There are paths to follow. That's what we've been trying to prototype out, ways to actually meet and address these issues. And as Lena said, using the municipality or the political or the democratic system as a hub or an infrastructure for conversations that are lacking, not putting them somewhere else or let just happen somewhere else, put it into the system, because then we can actually do something really powerful about it, because we still have relatively set a very well working democracy with a high level of trust, in comparison falling quite steeply, but in comparison to many other places quite high. But unfortunately, the stories told from, for example, more simple political positions to say, if life would, let's make America great again, you have the version, we have that version also. So it's really a scary time we're living in, because the last poll, the Swedish Democrats, which is a xenophobic, post-nationalistic party, had about 19% of the potential votes in the coming election of 2000 and, 18. So it's not that we can say, oh, they're just a bunch of weirdos over there. They're really among us. So it's for real for us.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a picture of our turnout in Sweden in the different election. You have
to the parliament and to the municipalities and regions,
And you can see when we got the first mission from our Congress, it was 2003, after the election with the lowest turnout ever in Sweden. And if we compare with other countries, of course, we have a really high turnout in the election. And we can also see that they have risen since 2002's election. But we can see a lot different between different election wards. If you look at this one is the ward where most people vote, where there are a lot of people that choose to go to the polling station. The next, what is the column?
Column.
Next column is...
Just say it cooler and then it sounds like English. Yeah.
Okay. I tried that.
Try that. Column. Yeah.
When I speak my Swinglish, I try that.
It works. Okay. See, they got it anyway. So.
Well, the next column is the wards where there are the lowest people that go to the polling station. And you can see that it differs over 50% in some of our municipality. And when we look at the background, the wards that at least people are voting is totally socio-economic based. There is where people are low educated, low social background, unemployment, and immigrants. And when we come in Sweden, when we talk about trust for the local level, it's really important that people want to go to the polls. So this is really a demand for us and a challenge for us. Because if we don't have trust on the local level, where we are really tight, what that means for our democracy system. So this is something that I don't have any here. I have really tried to push it away. That is really demanding for us.
Before you switch that one, just look at that number 55. That's the city where I live in, Gothenburg. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had hand grenades thrown into apartments between different criminal gangs in order to avenge earlier wrongdoings just a couple of weeks earlier. We have shootings, we have car fires, we have the whole shebang. But this is one of the key issues that we are looking at, is the risk of the average. Because if we look at it, and you guys said, well, that doesn't look too bad, that turnout's pretty good in comparison. But if we put it into an average, it doesn't look too bad. But if we take it apart and show it as polarities, we can see the high and we can see the low. The tension between that's what we call the fire. So it's working within that tension and not pretending it's not there, or mathematically just addressing it. Yeah, it's an average of, 64.8%. And as those 0.8, it seems very, very, oh yeah, it's really exact. It's just an illusion anyway. So there's something in that zone that we're trying to work with, but it's a bit hard to get there because many people fear going there, including myself. But one of the municipalities we're working with now is in Stockholm area. It's the same thing, but they have shootings, they have the riots, they have the car burnings, but we're doing proper work in that community with the politicians, with the people living there, with the police, with different civil society members. So it's possible to do that, but entering there is not relevant if you look at that and saying we don't have a problem. We're saying we have a problem and we better deal with it.
And we need to face it.
Yeah.
The next problem that we have, that's that to be a member in the political party is not so fancy any longer. 4% of the Swedish people are member in the political party. 1% of the Swedish people are active members. And what's about 95% that's not member, or the 99% that are not active, but they are active in other arenas, in free groups and in Facebooks or another place. They are not interested.
Yeah. They just use their democratic energy in a way that doesn't really match the system as it is. So there's no lack of perspectives, there's no lack of ability, there's no lack of engagement, but how it's funneled and how it's used, that's a really big challenge. So how do we enable that to come forward and be useful, not just destructive?
And we do the World Value Survey in Sweden, and Gothenburg University is responsible. And when we done it last time, in 2011, we can see that we have a mistrust of democracy among some groups of young people, that they don't trust the political system or the democratic system. They are willing to sell their vote in some way. And 15% of them think that it could be a really good idea that the military rule the state. And we can see that it's only Sweden and US that raised that point in the last World Value Survey. So we have a group of young people that don't think our democracy system is worth to live in. And this is really scaring for us. And how do we work with them?
And unfortunately, it seems to be a bias towards men being in this position because they feel like, well, where did my future go? And that's a really sort of depressing realization of one's life. So there's the gender dimension of it, but there's also sort of social. So there are many, many layers on this, but this is sort of an eye-opener. This came out in 2011, and many were really upset about the method they used, because then they could say, well, it's an irrelevant measurement because the method is faulty, so don't have to look at that inconvenient truth, which is unfortunately what seemed to happen. This is from the last National Values Assessment, the 7th one done in Sweden. We actually didn't have time to translate it or the energy to do it, but just look on the left-hand side. Because all the work we do in Swedish, so unfortunately you're not, I guess your Swedish is a bit hacky, I don't know. Yours is okay, yours is okay. But look on the left-hand side there, that's the current values of how we perceive current reality in Sweden. Violence and crime, conflict and aggression, and diversity. We have never seen those before. They are doing a major value jump, to speak CTT-ish. So that is a scary thing. Can I use that thing maybe?
Yes.
It's really strongly coming out from nowhere, but it's showing up very strongly. And we also have upholding law and order. So it's not just, and something Lena said earlier is worth emphasizing, is that what seems to be happening is that those issues we are addressing aren't anymore just for sort of the extremes, the extremely poor, the extremely rich. It's coming through the middle class. It's much stronger. You gave me a figure this morning. What was it? How many are properly filthy rich?
If we see on the rich people in Sweden, it's about 3-4%, the really rich people. And then we have the low income people, is about 20%, and the rest is the middle class. And what we can see now when we have a research in Gothenburg University about important, what do you call it?
The most important societal issue that we need to address right now, which is it?
Yeah, and we can see the migration have really boosted up from 29% 2014 to 53% 2015. And I think I talked about it yesterday, but you can see in 2015 we have 160,000 immigrants coming in during the autumn. So it's really a really strong tension for our society to handle. And we can see that people are really concerned about it. So it's now the most important issue for our public service, or what you say, to handle. And we also can see in the same research that the trust for our political institution have decreased. And this, what do you call it, graph?
Graph, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just say cooler, it's there.
Okay. We can look at the government level and also at the local level that the trust for our politicians are decreased. So, and it's connected to the issue of immigration and inclusion and so on. And this is something that our politicians really struggle with now, but they don't have any solution of it. They don't know how to talk to people about it. And also, they are really scared to talk with people about how do we handle our immigration and how do we handle inclusion, integration in our society. Because we can see that some of our small municipalities, they have changed the society from 2-3% of immigrants to 20% of immigrants. It's a totally new society to handle and totally new problems that they need to work with.
And the trust in the ability to actually do something about it is going down, and the necessity to do something about it is going up. Luckily, as we say, our work is in that context, not on the side of it, in the middle of it all. And luckily, we have a lot of researchers to work with. And this guy, Hans Abrahamsson, which was in the Stockholm session, he said this, if it's faulty in translation, it's my fault, but he says the complexity of today's societal challenges require a transformed and a co-creation based power structure in order to be handled in a socially sustainable way. So there are very clear views on co-creation is necessary. We need to address the power structures that are there, even if we like it or not, but also the complexity, which is the realization that there is no single answer. There is no single magic wand to sort of swish around in the air and things go away. It doesn't exist. And what we're looking for, I guess you guys seen this before, but it really, really puts the finger on what we're working for, is saying we need to go towards this. How do we manage to actually to learn to live side by side? How do we have an inclusive society which actually enables people to be what they are, independent of gender, religion, origin, whatever? But unfortunately, word-wise, we're still here. That's what we're talking about. We need integration. That means, yeah, we need to get you guys enclosed into the system of being Swedish, so you better behave. But reality is that we're doing this and this, physically, where people live. So our goal is to move in that direction. And doing that is a really tough challenge. And as Lena said earlier, we're doing a lot of work in this with dialogue and conversations between different entities. And we can see a very clear shift of both the physical, the relations, but also the values coming along. So the workshop we're inviting you guys who want to do that in the afternoon is what can we learn, and how can we learn about how do we have conversations or dialogues and co-creative processes where these actually might be in conflict, where there might be friction. We don't like it, it's that way, but it seems to be how things are actually playing out. We wrote a book about this, we asked Lena to write part of it, but she wrote the foreword because you're in Salar, so you're not allowed to say what you want. We actually are allowed to do that. It's called From Arrogance to Intimacy. It's a guy named Andy Williamson. He's a doctor, and he's really good at English, and he's the credible one of us. But Lena, Andy, and we wrote an illustration on a napkin a couple of years ago. I think it was like 2000. I don't know, 11, 12, something. And it looked like this, and that became a book. And this is a framework sort of to illustrate where we're working and why we see the necessity of working at it in a specific manner. So I'd just like to give you a flavor of that. If you want to get the book, you can buy it online, either at Amazon or Lulu or something like that, From Arrogance to Intimacy. But we said there seems to be a tension in the system, and we'd like that tension or that polarity actually to be visualized physically or metaphorically. We call it arrogance to intimacy, or we could say distance or nearness if you wanted to make it in a different way. Or we also talked about the tension between control and co-creation, and we said if we look at these issues we are needing to address from this sort of potentially fields or different fields, it could look something like this. We said there are 4 basic ways of what we're actually doing. You guys get all these slides, by the way, if you want to use them, and use them as much as you want. But on the lower left-hand side here, if we have a complex issue and we address it as we are elected, we are in power, if you don't like it, get rid of us in the next election. It's not a bad idea, actually. It's quite clear standpoint. This is what we believe in. So might be a pretty good strategy. On the upper left-hand side, we are really scared when we talk about processes that are co-creative and participative. It has to look good, but it's fake. Make it look good so we can pretend that people are actually being a part of a decision, and they're not, because they'll get it. So that's the big no-no in our world. This is actually what we are doing in Sweden in a very large scale, thanks to Salar. More or less all municipalities and regions are doing very good, intimate
dialogue,
participation work. But it's on their premises. It's based on the assumption that the power, the knowledge, and also the ability to fix stuff is within the party of the municipality, the region, or the physical entity of something. So it's sort of on their turf, on their terms. The big challenge is to realize, at least as we believe, that something up here which is profoundly different. And when we address complex issues, that's where we actually believe we need to move towards. Sharing power, being in a process of co-creation, but also in that process, creating both shared responsibility and accountability. We've been doing quite a lot of prototyping work down this alley for about since 2010 maybe. We're in the level of the 4th prototyping set now. The first one was a training which turned out to be totally lousy because we couldn't really get anything working, but it was, the training was potentially okay, but...
Yeah, and what we understand was how difficult it is to change the mindset of people inside the organization.
Yeah, and it was just like we met the power structure hard there. The second prototype was in a school setting of a municipality north of Stockholm because they had schools just going down the drain. We did a very large-scale intervention there based on the logics of our framework. It would turn out to be pretty successful in the sense that it actually started to build trust between different people, which needed definitely to build trust between them. So that was something interesting. The third prototype we worked in was with the Roma population of Sweden in 3 different municipalities based on legislation, and it was funded by the government to co-create a design for a consultation process that actually for real empowered the Roma population in comparison to the majority society. That turned out very well, but it was small scale, and if you can go from small scale to big scale, do it. So what we did now is we're working with 10 municipalities. 5 of them are in totally social unrest mode and social sustainability desires, and 5 are in more the physical issues of community planning and things like that. So in those 5, there are shootings, there are car fires, the whole stuff, and they are working based on the same logic as in this illustration. We call it prototype number 4 because we know we need to fail on a systematic basis in order to learn as much as possible. So we do not believe we are in control. We do not actually believe what we know is true, but we try, we learn, we fail, but we don't do it inside, we do it with people. In one of the working groups we have now, we have 30 people, 15 of them being physical residents of this area, and the other 15 is politicians, civil servants, police, and other people. And what's so interesting is that they never meet. They do lots and lots of stuff on their own. So they're like a piece of pie, all of them. They never work together. They are totally fragmented. And the views of each other are totally different, but when they sort of suddenly emerge in the same room physically and start addressing the complex of the hotter issues, they suddenly realize we have much more capacity. 10 minutes, right? Yeah, good. We're on time. Thank you. Just taking, because my eyesight's getting worse, Emma. Sorry about that. I'm still so young. Not. So we're doing proper work based on this framework. It's not just a theoretical idea, it's guiding our work. But one of the key issues for us was realizing that we cannot choose to work down here, we need to work up here, because the lack of trust in the system, because that is the most dominant perspective in all our work, lack of trust. Going in every direction between every actor in the system. And that needs to be shifted towards trust, of course, but first we need to realize that that actually is possible to talk about and relate to.
And it's also important to say it's just not trust between the citizen and the local authority. It's just that must mistrust from the politician, from the politician to the citizen. So
all directions.
Yeah.
And that was especially clear in the Roma work. Roma people in Sweden, it's our version of apartheid. We never talk about it in that sense, but it's the same thing. We've had more or less 400 years of that in Sweden. We still are doing it, but we don't talk. We have the Sami population up in north, so we're just being as arrogant as anyone else. We're not better than anyone else in that sense. But realizing that we need to build trust, and you can't do that through policy documents or mails or anything. You need to do that by meeting. So the arrogance to the shifting towards the intimacy is a physical, actually, presence in the mode of working together. But also the realization that the issues we are addressing, that there is no single part or party who has the answer that works for everybody. It's a necessity. The complexity pushes us up towards co-creation as not a, oh yes, let's just be happy and sit around the fire and think about things that might be nice to have. We really need to enter into that fire and really realize, oh dear, we have conflicting issues around values, what we think are interesting objectives, what our opportunities and priorities are. And those conversations, at least in the Swedish context, are quite rare, but they're emerging slowly. Of course, we're not just, as I said, this is the place we're working. We're not just playing around and hoping for the best. We've taken a lot of insights from different parts of the world, but primarily the US, and a magnificent lady named Susan Podziva, who works with Civic Fusion. It's a methodology she uses, and also partly coming from South Africa, from a systemic view of reality called Deep Democracy, which also resides in the US with a guy named Arnold Mindell, looking at it in a totally different manner. But this is the basic step by step, and do not be fooled by its linearity. Do not be fooled by its simplicity. It's messy. This is just a very nice postcard. It's not real. But what we're doing is realizing the fact that we need to do things in an orderly manner in order to actually learn in a systematic way. Because if we don't know what we're doing, we have no clue to what we want to compare to. And the people we are working with, which are real flesh and blood politicians sitting with real physical issues around schools, immigration, or whatever, we have to make it safe for them to enter the fire and not being burnt. Yes, we need the heat, we need the energy, we need the friction towards innovation, towards new possibilities, new opportunities. So what we've learned is a basic idea of this. We use the classic iceberg metaphor, but we say that we need two very different types of co-creation or dialogues. One we metaphorically call happy ending dialogues, or sitting around the fire. We're not making fun of those and saying they're irrelevant, but we're saying they don't do the job well enough. They are very good at gathering views, they're very good at illustrating different perspectives, they're very useful in that sense. But what we've seen, and I'm one of the living examples of that, of facilitating I don't know how many thousands of those conversations, but what we've seen so clearly, as soon as we touch upon heat, we go back and hope it goes away. The bad thing is, symbolically, if we say that that heat is a no voice, the more we pretend it's not there, the stronger it comes back in a very strong form. In this case, 20% of the Swedish population are actually thinking about voting for the National Democrats. So even if there is a no voice and we don't want to listen to it, it's there. So that resistance needs to be let go of to be a part of the conversation. That's why we talk about our work is actually, and this might sound for me at least very weird, we are very actively going into conflict. We are not pretending that it is either easy or there is a yes or no answer that is easy. We're saying, oh shit. But there is something symbolically in this twirly thing there, which is what we would call an edge or something that really is scary for us. There's something beyond that, which is that. But the pain of going through that eye of the needle, we need to take. And that's what we've come to realize, at least one of our realizations is that how to do that in a structured, in a at least as safe as possible manner, it requires a new sort or a deeper sort of facilitation, which one part we've realized is neutrality. The facilitator does not drive the process towards a specific goal or a specific, what would you call it, objective that maybe the person who pays the work has set up. That person does not value if a perspective is valid or not, if it is good or if it is bad. Because as soon as I value, if I'm the facilitator, saying, Anders, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to say that. I'm arrogant. I put myself in a power position above him. Either he shuts up or he resists. He resists definitely, but he doesn't always do it verbally. And you put that on a systemic level, the more we push that no voice away, the stronger it comes back to us. And that's what's happening in our country right now. So what we've come to realize, even if this looks fancy and simple, it's really a messy process, but we've learned a lot of things. One thing is about perspectives, that there is no truth. There is no best way. There are different ways. One thing is the ability to sit in that fire requires some sort of leadership in the moment, which makes it safe to stay there at least for a while to see what we could learn from and go forward with. So that's where we're working now. We have lots of problems doing it. We are messing up. We're hurting people. We're hurting ourselves. But we know that what we're learning is more worth than actually what we're losing. So what we'd like to do, if you want to know stuff about that, blah, 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 mails and stuff, but the workshop, you'll get it soon, but the workshop this afternoon is we'd like to continue the conversation with you guys who want to be in that workshop to see, what have you learned? Because we know that we don't know. That's the obvious learning of 25 years of leading dialogues, is the realization, I have no clue. So what have you guys learned? What have you guys learned? But not the sitting around the fire stuff. Unfortunately, we know that part too. We want the stuff that is really where there's heat. How can we help each other? Because we believe, at least, that we're not very single in having this problem in this world we live in right now, because it's complex, it's quite shitty, but we have to do something about it. At least I believe it. And I can't go into that process saying, well, I know the truth, everybody please comply. Doesn't work. Anything else?
Now you say it's so good.
Okay, that's it.